Greetings, insiders. Today is May 22nd, the Friday before a long holiday weekend. I hope you have some really fun plans ahead. And you're definitely starting it off right by listening to me. I have something really special planned for you today, so you made the right choice. Ad Age Insider is jam-packed with advice for industry leaders navigating the wild twists and turns of the ad industry. And I know not all of you listen to the end of every episode. So I've made it easy for you. I've put together some of our best clips with advice for chief marketing officers. So buckle up for a collection of takeaways for brand leaders. You may even want to write a couple of them down. If you enjoy today's format, let me know. We always want to make Ad Age Insider as useful for you as possible. As always, you can email aapodcast@adage.com with feedback or other topics you'd like to hear me break down with Ad Age reporters. Or my LinkedIn DMs are always open. I'm Parker Heron, and this is Ad Age Insider. Let's get into it. To start us off, here's the fabulous Tim Nudd, Creativity Editor at Ad Age. He's going to give a somewhat scalding read on the state of the CMO. This is from episode 31, in which he gave takeaways from the winners of Ad Age's Creativity Awards. So definitely go check that out if you haven't listened already. It's absolutely dripping with insights. Take it away, Tim. All right, my last question for you is, if I'm a CMO, what is something that you think I should learn or you would want me to learn from this year's set of winners and take away to my own work?
Well, I think, most CMOs lately have been, I think, moving away from creativity. I think that there's an obsession with efficiencies and things like this. I think that, the power of the idea is just as important or more important than ever. We talk about AI. When AI can create sort of uniformly perfect imagery for everybody, like the idea is what more than ever what stands out. You can't sort of hide a bad idea behind good execution anymore because everyone's going to have good execution. So when you look through our list of winners, I think you see ideas that are just fun, playful, unexpected, entertaining. So just drilling back to that idea piece and just saying, what are we trying to say? How does coming at this from a different angle and not just relying on spectacle? We saw so many Super Bowl ads this year that just the idea was so lame and it was sort of dressed up to be supposedly fun. And people see through that. That stuff doesn't really connect, doesn't get shared. So I think what CMOs really need to think about is less the execution piece and just more of the concepts and going back to what creativity's always been about, which is finding that concept that's going to break through. The concept that doesn't necessarily logically make sense, but like people are going to embrace. And so many of the campaigns this year that we recognized did that. And I think raising those up is critical today.
Next, let's head on over to our most recent episode. I chatted with our consumer insights reporter, Erika Wheless, about the traits Gen Z look for in their favorite brands and how you can build better marketing that aligns with young consumers' loyalties. Here's a hot tip from Erika.
Don't lie. It just comes down to don't lie about it. Gen Z, as we all know, they are savvy consumers and they know how to dig into any claims. And I think especially around sustainability, if you're trying to greenwash, because false claims about quality will be called out and called out quickly, and knowing Gen Z probably pretty publicly as well. I will say a couple of maybe like where this went wrong and then like where it worked out, but like where it went wrong, I know coming back to Coach, actually they released a new line of, it's called Coachtopia leather. It is supposed to be like sustainable leather. Tanner Leatherstein, that TikTok guy, he looked at it and he's like, I normally really love Coach, but he like did several tests on the leather. He was like, this is essentially plastic. He was like, this feels very greenwashed. But we've also seen where like the other way of going, well, the Bog Bag folks, I appreciate that their CEO, she was like, I would love to take on these dupes head on. They do not, she's like, I have a team who is like, let's not do that. Let's not give the dupes airtime. But when you stand behind your product to make something good, your consumers will stand behind it too. And she mentioned that she had seen like a this or that video on probably TikTok, I'm guessing. And I believe it was between like a real bog bag and then a dupe, I want to say from Walmart maybe. And there were the video was like, oh, pick the Walmart one. And there were people in the comments who were bog bag
Mhm.
customers who were like, wrong.
Yeah.
Wrong. You need to go buy the bog bag.
Wow.
Your consumers will come in and tell, they'll proselytize for your brand too if it's really good.
Now, let's throw back to January when our news editor E.J. Schultz was hot off the CES showroom floor, and he pointed out tension in the AI discourse among CMOs. If you like what you hear, definitely check out episode 17.
I guess it's just the expectations of where we are with AI. I think that, one of the quotes I got from someone, I'm an observer, and this was sort of echoed throughout, is we're kind of moving from the theoretical curiosity phase into the implementation phase now. And so that's like, okay, it sounds great to like talk about all the possibilities of AI, but when you're the CMO, you're the brand leader now being charged to actually start implementing these things, that's when it gets complicated. And that's when the real pressure is on, because I think, they all have their CEOs looking over their shoulder, just expecting, because they're reading constantly how AI is creating all these efficiencies and shit. So they want, where's the efficiencies in my marketing department? So I feel like that is going to be a huge theme with 2026 in general, is just like who's able to implement these things in a way that makes sense, and not just to do it, but to do it to actually improve processes and improve your business.
Ooh, that was riveting. Now, 2 clips on CMO's relationships with agencies. First, a little nugget from senior agency reporter Brian Bonilla about how brands' needs from agencies are changing. That's from episode 24. Go check it out. And then a clip from episode 23, in which agency reporter Ewan Larkin broke down the complex convo on principal media buying and transparency, or the lack of transparency, around media rebates.
One thing that I don't know if it made the final cut, but it was this idea of clients are looking to agencies to be even more of a partner than I think agencies are used to in the past decade. Meaning, they're not just like hiring them to do marketing. There's so much going on that they're looking at their agencies and saying, "How are you doing research in this subject? Are you understanding, which types of tools I should be using?" And that's not really I think that's the original idea of what ad agencies were supposed to be, like when they were first formed. And I think over the years that hasn't been as much of the case. And now we're kind of reverting back to this like more partner like need from clients. But I don't think a lot of agencies are ready for that level of, thinking. And I think that's why you're seeing the agencies that are finding success have that level of thinking up top and have that kind of client like relationship, that kind of account service type, ability that, not every agency is great at.
If I'm a marketer and I'm hearing about all of this for the first time, you're blowing my mind open. What question should I be asking my agency about this topic?
I think you should be asking, I think you should be making explicitly clear whether you're opting in or opting out to have incentives, right, with media deals. You should be making that clear, but then you should also be going and asking, what kinds of money are we getting back? Are we getting inventory back? Let's double check that. Like I said, ask the agency for those questions, and then I would actually urge you to go check that with the publisher as well to make sure that it lines up. You can kind of tighten up the language in contracts, but one thing that I should note, and this has been some of the kind of the feedback that I got since doing the Acadia story, is that when that K2 report came out in 2016, and for anybody that's not familiar, it was kind of exposing the undisclosed media rebates. There was a lot of calls to tighten up the language in contracts, but I feel like a lot of agencies kind of just then change the language. They can call it something else other than rebates. So it's always difficult, I think, to kind of make sure that the contracts are ironclad. But what you should do, definitely, no question, if this is something that you're curried about, is make sure that you can allow for frequent audits in the agency contract. I think this is something that a lot of marketers are, wising up to, that they need to do this, and you can get consultancies to help you, media consultancies, but make sure that you're allowing for that in terms of the contracts. And then just, I think it's worth having a candid conversation with the agency and then making sure that what they're saying lines up with what the publisher is telling you too. One thing that I heard from the likes of Acadia and others is that brands actually aren't asking the publishers themselves these questions, and maybe that's an extra step that they can do to be, to tidy it up a little bit.
Yeah, I think those are really good points, because I think the takeaway for me from this conversation is not necessarily like agency's bad, they do these
No.
things, icky, gross. It's more, being sneaky is bad, and not having transparency is bad, and the responsibilities on both the agency and the brand to make sure that the business is working for both of them and not just for one. So is that right?
Yeah, that's right too. And I think just the only part that I would add to that, Parker, is that publishers are not doing anything wrong by offering incentives, right? Like that's like a standard negotiating practice. We're not trying to indict the entire practice of incentives and kickbacks. It's just making sure that they're handled responsibly when they're then passed over to the agency.
All right, closing us out, maybe one of my personal favorites, Ad Age's executive editor, Judy Pollack. She and I dug into Ad Age's A-list winners in episode 25. Lots of great lessons shared in that episode, particularly for those looking to win an award from Ad Age. But this note of hope is a perfect one to close us out. If somebody, like you said earlier, comes cold to the list, doesn't know anything about it, and they see this year's winners and this year's collection of standouts, what is the one thing that you would want them to take away?
I think that I would like them to take away that this business is actually thriving. A lot of people seem to think, if you look at some of the holding company stocks and whatever, they've been bouncing around a lot. A few of them were pretty low, even if they had pretty good results. And I think there's sort of this misnomer, particularly with the advent of AI, that the ad industry is a declining industry. It's not growing leaps and bounds like it was when I first started back in the dark ages, but I do think that it's still a very vibrant, very exciting, and cool place to be.
All right, I hope you enjoyed today's special episode format. I know I did. Let us know by following Ad Age Insider wherever you're currently listening or watching. Maybe even give us a thumbs up or a 5-star. I don't know, could be a nice holiday treat. Thank you to Brian producer Lauren Chiardio and my editor Anna Sakula. Thank you for listening. I'm Parker Heron, and this is Ad Age Insider. Enjoy your day.